Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and get started. I've got just a few words of introduction to kick us off here. First of all, I wanted to thank you all so very much for tuning in today. We are recording this presentation, so this is something that we'll post up to our Medium blog. And at the end of this presentation, I'll provide links to get you back to that Medium blog, as well as some other to-do list items. I actually have a request for you here at the end of the presentation. But just to kind of frame this up, tee this up, Elika reached out to Neil, who's the program director at the Jefferson UX IA program. And Elika mentioned she was interested in having some students work on the W3C specifications. So I'll have Cephas go ahead and go to the next slide. So our challenge was to take a look at these specifications and recommend improvements to accessibility, usability, and pleasure, kind of the key tenets of user experience design for those W3C specifications with minimal impact to the HTML that's generated for each spec. And we actually had some great feedback on that initially. We thought we could make no changes to the HTML. Then kind of with some conversation, we realized we could make some changes to the boilerplate or top information of those specifications. So that was what the students set off to do. So the students on the phone today are Sarika, Ishita, Cephas, Pratik, and Raisha. They've been working on this for the whole semester, so since late January. Hopefully you've followed along with our blog, but to kind of frame up what this presentation is, most of our semester was really spent doing UX research. That's the standard user experience design process, and we'll talk through our process in this presentation as well, which really meant that in the last few weeks of the term, we were able to generate kind of one draft of what a design could look like. So we did do some wireframes, and then we moved into visual design. For the sake of my students and learning, I wanted them to complete a thought, but it's really just a first complete thought in what is probably a future with additional feedback, additional revisions, really getting that content in front of the W3C community and getting the feedback this needs. So we pushed to really get a visual design out, but this is not something that's implementation ready. This is a first draft, it's a first thought, and at the end of this, I'll provide some places where you all can provide feedback to my students, and we'll document all this stuff and provide it out to all of you to make sure that we get you all the material, all the things you need from the process we've been through. So like I said, we're gonna kick this off. Ashita is actually gonna start with our design process. Sarika is gonna list out the problems we discovered through this process. And then we're gonna go through visual designs for desktop, mobile, as well as print. And then I'll come back in, we'll do next steps, and then facilitate some Q&A. I think we'll have enough time to answer any questions you guys might have. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Ashita.
Hi, everyone.
You're very quiet.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Hi.
Can everyone hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. That's better.
Okay. Cephas, yeah. So just to give a brief idea of our design process. So at first we started with understanding what's there a problem, I mean, why there is a problem in the first place, who uses the W3 specification, why and how. So basically we wanted to understand the magnitude of the problem. So we started with taking interviews from stakeholders to different kind of users like web authors, implementers, testers. Then we analyzed the problem in numerous sessions, leading to form personas and other and their journey to reach the respective goals. And then we created some wireframes, and after numerous iterations and some usability testing, we ended up having a visual design. So I would ask Sarika to tell us about the problems, mainly the main problems that we could get in the defined process.
Good
afternoon, everyone. So I'd like to,
You're very quiet. I'm sorry.
yeah, can you hear me now?
That's much better.
Great. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what we did in order to identify all the problems with the current specification standards and the way it's laid out. Our main focus was to go through the visual design and how it is done and how easy or difficult it is for people to read it. What we also wanted to do is know how the usability of the entire website is. So the questions that we laid out and tested, we wanted to test right from how you access the specifications up to how you read the specifications and how you execute them within whichever field you require. Uh, the user testing was done by 3 groups, and we tested it with different users from all over the world. Like, we were lucky enough to get many people on board to test with us, which was amazing. And a few problems that we found out was that there was a problem with searchability of the specifications, like all the specifications which occur like in the results on Google page are laid out in such a way that the user does not always read the specification that is required. That was one of the main problems in searchability with respect to function. Then we went on to find out what were the problems while reading the specification. And we found out that people had a difficult time going through kinds of links that are available. And sometimes the links take them to external pages, sometimes they are internal, sometimes they are definitions, and it's a little tricky to find out what they want to find, what they are looking for. There are also people who are like comparing different specifications, and it gets difficult when the website becomes responsive. There is a problem of looking through different versions of specifications. That was one of the key issues that we wanted to try to solve, how that user can go through different specifications and different versions within a specific specification. That is also something that we have addressed. I would also like to mention that the table of contents was easy to read. That was something that many of them mentioned that they liked it, but we have just tried to improve the way the visuals are right now within the table of contents as well. Apart from that, we found out problems like what the hierarchy of content should be within a single standards page. And we wanted to make sure that the global search is also included as a part of the entire experience, because there are users who are looking for multiple specifications onto the website, and we wanted to make not just the visual part of viewing a specification and reading the specification easy, but also accessing different specifications also. So that is something that we've addressed in the problems. The other thing about the content is that the documentation is too wordy, so it is difficult to terse through different items and read what you want to read. Like reaching sections within a specification and jumping through it kind of gets difficult. We wanted to address that as well. The diagrams, the layout, the writing sometimes is inconsistent because there are multiple writers, and we wanted to make a clarification on who is writing which part of the specification. And we went through a little competitive analysis because many happen to mention that they look for specifications on different standards, like they refer MDN, and we try to understand how others are dealing with writing the standards. And we wanted to incorporate some good like observations from that within the W3C specifications. And one of the main issues that we also found out was the boilerplate. And the boilerplate has a lot of important content, like you have to file a bug, you have to read who the authors are, you need to see which all versions of the specification are available. And we wanted to make sure that the boilerplate is very crisp, easy to read, easy to understand. And the functionality of the boilerplate is quite important. when it comes to filing a bug, which seemed to be like mentioned by many users, that having file a bug very obvious is one of the things that they would expect, and we wanted to make sure that the boilerplate is like classified and organized in a manner that is easy to understand. So these are some of the problems that we came across during our user testing, and we have attempted like to solve most of them. So I would also like to talk about, like, I will share my screen and I would like to show how we came up with the style guide. Uh, can I please know that the screen is shared?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Okay.
It looks like CFUS has stopped sharing, and now we can see your screen.
Okay. Yeah. In order to start this process, what we try to do is find out what is the best font. We noticed that W3C right now is using Helvetica. We just wanted to introduce a more modern font, which is why we went ahead with Roboto. Roboto is a sans serif font by Google. It's very modern, approachable, and we wanted to like change the look and feel of W3C. So that was the first thing that we targeted. We wanted to narrow down on which font would be the best. We like experimented with multiple fonts within the specification, and Roboto was like, everyone liked it. The other thing that we addressed is the colors. So the primary color scheme will be blue, which is the W3C brand color. And we wanted to like take the brand color and have a monochrome color scheme along with blacks and grays. And the secondary color scheme will be the section over here, which is, I'm sorry if this is like, yeah. The secondary color scheme will be the notifications of different kind, for example, notes and examples within the documentation. These are some of the components that you will see when you get to see the visual design, when we come to the visual design. But these were some of the components that we have created. Again, making sure that it is easy to read, understandable, and there is not much chaos in the way everything is laid out on the website. We wanted to make sure the sections where you have to select a version is very obvious at the top of the like navigation bar. The icons are also created in such a way that they are easy to access. So we have broken down the entire boilerplate into comprehensible sections. So there was a thought behind how the table of content should be laid out, how easy can we make the process of locating which section you are on the documentation. And that's how we have addressed this. The third part was finding out what would be the most optimum width of a reading paragraph. And we found out that it could be around 65 to 100 characters within one line. That is the optimum width of a paragraph, which is very easy to read on web. And we specified a line height that can make the entire paragraph very easy to read as well. So this was something regarding that. We also like followed the W3C color scheme for all the notes, examples, issues, and created like a more organized note making. The fourth section was the links. This was mentioned as a very critical reading experience, that knowing what kind of different links are available, what I can click on, where is it going to take me, was a big concern with all the users of specifications. And we wanted to address that in a very clear manner. All the links are accessible, so they are all underlined, they are bold. These will be the same page links. This is the styling that we've used for links which will take you to a section within the document itself. The blue bold underlined lines will take you to sections outside of the documentation. The ones which are highlighted will be definitions, and the one which is dotted will be just like full forms. This is how we try to like segregate different kinds of links. And I have also shown how they will look on hover. So underneath here, there will be tooltips for all the links on web. And every time you hover over any section, it will be either an external link, it will be a full form. And over here, if you hover on HTML, if you come to this section, you can see A.1. So what this is going to do is tell the user or the reader which section within the table of contents is this going to be. So there is an action inserted before you click on the link itself, which gives you a little note as to what it is going to do and where it is going to take you. The fourth is if it's an external link, which is completely outside of the W3C documentation, it can have like an icon of this sort. So we just wanted to use icons and colors and underlines to make sure that everything is accessible as well as clear for anyone accessing the specifications. So this is the part of the style guide, and then I would ask Ishita to explain the visual design.
Thanks, Sarika. I would like to share my screen.
Okay, we see your screen.
So, so as Sarika have mentioned, we tried to design the specification template so as it forms or it is arranged as such a manner that the visual elements are addressing the principles of a good UX experience, UX design. So the user experience is shaped to elicit the user response and behavior. So in the top, you can see like here user have the feeling where they are in terms of all the specifications. And then in the next section, the user can identify the specification in which they are at this moment. And there are tags which categorize the specification and also the version. So we laid out the version in the top of the boilerplate, and we put a drop-down menu to understand what other versions are there. And if user wants, there are all other versions they can go to. The table of contents are designed in such a manner that it's always there for the user to see what's going on in the contents. And also there are features which are important to be there, which is universal to each specification, but very rarely looked at, like contributors, metadata, and reference. So we have integrated it with the table of contents. And in the table of content, they can see in which section of the specification they are right now with a visual hint. And whenever the user wants, they can get rid of the table of content and have a clean reading experience of the specification. Actions like search within the specification, filing a bug, GitHub, or pulling request or commit history, we have categorized actions and put tool buttons like this. So it's obvious that informations are laid out in different patterns and actions are laid out in different patterns. And one of the main problems where like user get lost, like if they're in the right specification or not, or if they are other specification that they would like to know of the same category or any other category. So here they can reach to the global search section and they can write whatever they feel like, and it would there would be results within the page showing what are the specifications are there. And whenever the user wants, he can get rid of the global search and come back to the specification. And so the idea is whenever user is scrolling through the specification, the top global search area kind of slides out, and the user have a very clean layout of boilerplate contents, with all the contents that they need to reach out, and whenever they feel like, they can come back to the table of contents and then go back, and then they can use the tool buttons, and they can. So the main issue was to give user a very clean and clear reading template, where the main idea is to have a very clear reading experience of the specification template. So that was our desktop version of the specification template. I would like to ask Pratik to show us our mobile template next.
And maybe while Pratik is getting set up, since we're doing well on time, if anyone has any questions about desktop, we can answer those now, or we can circle back to them at the end as well.
I had a couple of questions. One of them was like, how did you choose the secondary colors? Are they just the ones that we have, or are they slightly different? If they're different, what makes them different, and how did you, the ones we have are just the ones we inherited?
Mostly we followed the ones you have, but when we were designing, if a little bit of contrast was needed, we changed some of the colors a bit to have a proper contrast on the visual design. But mostly especially the the main blue color, we
Right.
yeah.
That one, we don't get to choose.
Okay.
For the links, so one of the tricky things with links is that one thing I didn't see you directly address was also the fact that some specifications are extremely dense with the number of links that are in a paragraph, because every third noun is a link to the definition of that noun. Did you have any recommendations on how to make that less?
Yeah, I would
just very, you look at it and you just like want to run away because there's so many links.
Right.
Read it.
I would like to answer that. So when we thought of the links, we had addressed that problem through the interviews, and many people had mentioned about that. So what we decided is that when we conduct the user testing, we divided one group into the links with underlines and color bold, only bold typefaces and underlines, and we tried it that way. The other group tried it with icons. So the icons were spaced in between all the content, and that was just absolutely not accepted, because no one liked the fact that we had icons for every time there was a link, because just like you said, there sometimes the links are so dense and the reading experience is very difficult if you have too many icons. So the most optimum solution that we thought of was to have icons on hover, because that's something MDN was also doing. And we thought that whomever we spoke to during the interviews, when we tested it without the icons and just like on hover links, we thought that keeping the number of colors to a minimal and instead trying different shades of grays and blues, going with the color scheme that you already have, would allow for a better reading experience. So that's how we narrowed down on having on hover tooltips, which will have icons specifying whether it's external, internal, if it's a definition or something like that. But I definitely understand your concern, because there are so many different kinds of links that uh, it is just difficult to differentiate, and we wanted to kind of classify them on the basis of external, internal definition, like have a more generic grouping of links, and then give additional information on hovers.
Okay. I think one of the tricky things is that some specifications are, the whole specification is one specification from the perspective of W3C. And so most of the terms that are defined in the same specification, just maybe in a different page, but in the same spec. And then, so you have, and then other specifications like CSS are broken up into multiple specifications. So a lot of key terms that are used over and over and over again in a spec are defined in another spec. It's still in the CSS family of specifications, but they are not in technically part of that specification. And then of course there's definitions which are crossing into a different technology, like we might link to some definition in the DOM spec or in the HTML spec. And so there's multiple levels of internal versus external, and what were the definitions that were, what are the distinctions that we actually need to make? Is it this is in the same page versus this is in another page of the same spec? Is that something that needs to be distinguished from those, or do those things need to be distinguished? Do we need to distinguish this link goes to a different spec, but it's might or might not be part of the same kind of set of technology, or versus like, so what is internal and what is external is not, there's multiple levels of that. And so I wanted to know what level did you decide needs to be made the distinction, and how do you make that decision?
Honestly, from our understanding, we just wanted to make sure that the links within the specifications are marked with the table of contents section, like the numbering within the table of contents. The links which are outside of the specification which you're reading, but it is just taking you to a section within another specification, then that's marked in a different way. And if it's an entirely external link which is taking you outside of the W3C, then it's marked in a different way. So those were the three classifications that we finally narrowed it down to.
Okay. It would be, I think that an area for us to investigate further is really dig into that particular distinction, because there are links that go outside of W3C but go to a spec that is deeply integrated into W3C specs.
Right.
Like, for example, the DOM and HTML specifications are very closely linked to W3C's specific, even though they're in a different organization, they're very closely linked to what we're doing here, and in fact used to be hosted at W3C. And so in a sense they're managed by a different organization, but it's almost as if they were in the same kind of category of type of link from the perspective of someone reading the spec.
Right.
Because most of the people reading the spec don't care who the organization is if it's about how closely the technology is related.
Right.
So it's a complicated set of distinctions to make, and I think
right. And I would completely understand that, because we did face a challenge and we tried to get an understanding of how many different kinds of links there are from people who use it, because for us, it was a difficult decision to even go into, just like you mentioned, because it's so deep. There are so many layers to the different kinds of links and how they can be classified, that we just took a very generic approach for it. But I completely understand that there will be so much more into how we can classify these links on the basis of whether it's internal, external, or any other way. And if we can do that, that will be really good, because even we faced a lot of challenges when it came to links, because versions was still easy to understand. But when it came to links, we conducted the user testing and we asked all of the users about if they know how many different kinds of links there are. And so many of them just said that we know what we use, but it's difficult to just, find out, make a list of all the different kinds of links that are available. So your input would be really valuable in terms of how we can further classify the links and create icons which can give a more accurate understanding of where am I going to go if I click on this link.
Right. But I think another important, I mean, we can make many categories of links, but the question that we need to make sure we have is which distinctions are necessary to make in the styling and which ones don't matter.
Right. I understand.
Okay, in the interest of time, let's jump into our mobile designs here, and we'll come back if we have time at the end. We'll come back for Q&A.
Hi everyone. So the moment we introduce that W3C is going to have a website, it is also important that we take into consideration the responsive side of it. So this is a very quick mock-up of how the responsive website will look like. So imagine that you're already on a specification, you're viewing through it. So you'll get to see all the specification and details about it. The idea is to keep or merge the table of content in one so that the information which you see can also be compressed and expanded according to your convenience. If you want to go into, searching the global aspect of specification and want to access a different specification, you can click over it and you can see all the other specifications which you can access. You can also make sure that whatever specification you're looking into, for example, a specification has introduction which is really long, you can make sure that that specification link is still accessible in the sense that, for example, it locks itself so that you know that which section of that specification you're looking for, and you can collapse that information again to make sure that you have exited that area of viewing. You can also get into which version you're looking for. So we have maintained the same consistency over here as well. Like you can see the published version, the editor's draft, and all the other versions. So the moment you say that you want to go to a older version of the specification, you can go on all other versions. Here you will kind of be redirected to the section where you have this history. This is just a mock-up, but just for the understanding on the flow of the whole website, I have made it up. So you go over here, you say that, okay, fine, I want to go to the last section or the first working draft of this specification. You click on it, you'll get on that section where you'll see that it is an outdated version. You'll get to see the details of that version, and you again have the same functionality of actually going through the specification, getting to read all the documentation in it, and going about making any differences which you have made into it. The idea was to keep most of the things restricted on the phone, such as filing a bug or comment history, because those are the things which you are much more focused towards making those changes using your desktop. So the idea is to compress this information in such a way so that this device can be used for viewing purposes rather than making any changes, and which is quick, accessible, easy to navigate through, and the information is upfront. So that was the basic idea behind taking these points into consideration and compressing the information in such a way so that it's also easier. So that's about what the mobile is actually going to take. Any comments, any feedback? We like to take this ahead as well.
Yeah, so if there's any questions on the mobile, go for it.
I think the outdated version coloring band looks great and way more smooth than what we are doing currently. My concern here is there a way to expand everything if somebody wants to start at the top and read their way through multiple sections. It gets annoying if you have to expand every single one on your way down.
The idea was to begin with, I actually started off with taking that idea into consideration, like just keep it open and everyone just can go through every documentation. But then it became so difficult to pinpoint specific sections of the documentation. So what I mean by that is, because it is a mobile version, the scroll becomes huge. Like if you are at, let's say, basic concepts and the introduction, conformance and terminology has a huge section, then it becomes really difficult for the person to actually keep on scrolling. The only idea behind keeping this collapsible was it easier, it's accessible, and as I mentioned before, like this will always stick to the header as well, so that it is basically similar to the analogy of wayfinding. You know exactly where you are. It becomes easier for you to identify in which section you're looking for, and because of the collapsed documentation, it becomes easier for you to actually go through every specific section of it. So that was the idea behind doing it. But
no, I mean, I think it's a good idea. It definitely makes it a lot easier to navigate through the spec. The question is every section and subsection collapsible, or just the top level sections?
Every section is collapsible. So
okay, so some of the sections are very short, and so if as you're reading you have to expand every section, in some cases it might be what you want because you're drilling down to something specific, but if you're trying to read an entire section from start to end, I imagine it would get annoying, and it would discourage the person from continuing to read, because they have to, there's this like hiccup every time you get to the next section.
That makes sense.
And then a very minor comment is that at the top, when we are not seeing the very top of the page, it probably makes more sense to keep the W3C logo rather than the category tags, okay. Especially as the category tags, it might end up that there's lots of them and we don't want to take up all the space for all of them.
All right. Thanks for the feedback.
Cool.
Yeah, I would like to hand it over to Cephas. He'll take us through the print version.
Yes. So
it's funny. I think you guys are not getting the stop sharing control. There we go.
I'm not getting the control either. Okay, I got it.
Cool.
Yes, so hi everyone. So I worked on the print version for the specifications, and the primary thing was to make it really easy to read on paper, and I've done the designs on a letter format of print. And one of the problems that we encountered through the respondents was that they had said that there's a lot of CSS styling which is used in the print, and that makes it harder to read. So we wanted to just do a black and white mock-up of the print design to show how it could look. And the primary focus that we targeted was to use the maximum usage of space on the paper, and also have a very content-driven document which is neat and with a good amount of spacing so that a person can easily identify the content that they want to see. Quite a few of the respondents said that they print the specifications when they're working on them, and then browse or glance at the specifications on the printed pages more than the desktop or the mobile. And this would really help them view the specifications on the paper. So what we've done is added the content of the editors and all that right below the title of the specification, and also include the version, which is the working draft, right on the top of the first page. And the one thing that we tried to change was, instead of having big heavy gray fills for the note and for different notices, we wanted to change that to borders with the stylings, because using the gray fill-ins would require a lot of ink in print, So making this has the same styling with the sharp edges at the corners, with the thick borders as well. And we also wanted to maintain the fact that there are a lot of links in each specification. So we used underline and bold for external links and underlines for inter-page links. And we also wanted to talk about the fact that we wanted to include the table of contents as well in the print design to make sure that users know the different contents that are available in that specification for reference as well. So, and we use the same style from the style guide that Sarika walked us through with, using the same line height to make it easier to read, and a little bigger font size than what is usually used in the current W3C print style. So this is the print style.
So we can pause for just a second to see if there's any questions on this, and then we're going to move into some next steps and any Q&A.
I had a few comments. The first one is that the margins here are very narrow, and that while it will fit a little bit more content on the page, a lot of people take notes on their printouts, and so having wide margins is actually useful. And then another point was that for the cross references, we already have brackets, and it doesn't seem to make sense to make the cross reference bold, underlined, and brackets. So especially those links are not clickable when you have a printout. What they are, they're an index into the last section of the referencing section, which is a bibliography. They're references to the bibliography, and typically citations don't get bolded and underlined in addition to bracketed. They're kind of a parenthetical, like if you want to read more about this, go here. This particular spec has a few exceptional uses where they're using the reference as a noun, but a lot of specs it's just a side reference.
Okay. Okay, thank you for your feedback. We will definitely include this. So I think back to you, Lauren.
Yeah, so if, here, actually, I can present the last couple things here. See if I can get the right desktop going. So we have a couple of other recommendations that we pulled up, and we'll be sure to include these with the notes. But mostly I want to jump into, and these were things, so the other recommendations here were things that we discovered but didn't solve in our design process. And it could be because we wanted to stay in our lane. These just weren't things that fit in with our recommendation. Some of these are, you know, like creating a, let me see if I can find it here. Oh, we had it somewhere. Anyway, there were some comments around, user comments around reading the specifications. The specifications are really wordy. The language is inconsistent if you go across different technologies. So the thought here was, you know, creating a style guide around the language used in the specifications. This is something we were definitely not going to address with the designs, but something we heard. So we're providing all of our research findings to you in the next week or so. We'll make all of that stuff available. So you'll have all of this information from the mouths of babes, from the users we spoke with. So all of this content will be available to you. So in terms of next steps, as I kind of framed this up earlier, this is a first draft. I wanted my students to complete desktop, mobile, and print versions, a complete thought. So they had something nice for their portfolio. So they had an opportunity to kind of drive to a sort of finishing point, but this is by no means the finishing point for the W3C. So I think the next step here is for all of you to take the opportunity to provide some feedback. So in just a minute, I'll Slack up the links where you can do that. We'll be posting all of this content to our Medium publication where we've been kind of blogging about the work we've done. We will also be posting links to all of the detailed content. So we've got notes. We've got Google Sheets files with all of our findings. We've got survey data. We're going to take out the names of the people who completed the survey, but then we can provide the survey data. So the Medium publication will be the place to go to provide comments, to provide feedback. All of that will be captured and wrapped into the files we deliver to you. So in the next week, my students and I will be uploading that content to Google Drive and then sharing out those links via Medium as well. So the two links that I'm going to provide to you, and I'm going to stop sharing so I can do that in the chat. One is the Medium publication itself. The other is a project evaluation. So part of the students' grades here is feedback from their client. In the case of the W3C, all of you are our client. So I would ask if you've had the opportunity to review the Medium publication, the content that they've put out over the last few weeks, please go ahead and evaluate their performance. Of course, this is just one entry into what their grade will be, but I would like your feedback as well. There is, at the bottom of that kind of survey, it's a Google form, there's a open paragraph where you guys can provide any additional feedback that you don't want to post publicly on the Medium publication. So one way or another, get in touch. If you have feedback, please provide it. And in the last few minutes here, we have 9 minutes left. We're happy to take any questions that you have or any feedback you have. If you don't want to unmute and talk, you can post something to the chat, but happy to field any questions that you have.
Thanks for providing that link. I'm going to look through it. One thing that I heard come up here is that sometimes there are some restrictions, right? There are colors you need to use. So I think it'd be helpful to find out what those are as you move forward.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Jonathan, did you hear anything other than colors?
I didn't, but
Okay.
whenever I find one thing, I always assume there are more.
Yeah, certainly. I think in our design brief, we kind of laid out some of the restrictions. But as I mentioned early on, we thought our initial restriction was like, stay out of the HTML, kind of a CSS only approach to redesigning the specification pages. But we found out actually we could have some influence over the HTML of kind of the boilerplate introductory content of those specifications. So there might be assumptions we've made that could be corrected as well. And that would be good to capture for the teams that work on this in the future. So our goal here is to create something holistic to hand off to the next team that will be working on this.
The colors are definitely not restricted other than the W3C branding blue. We can use any colors. I would say the students did an amazing job with the research and coming up with ideas and really rethinking what specifications at W3C can be from a user experience perspective. In terms of scoping, yeah, we can do more than the CSS. We can change the HTML, but a lot of the things that were presented here, not all of them, but a lot of them would require a very significant amount of back-end work, which sounds like, it was a fantastic vision for the far future, but it's not something we can implement immediately because we don't have the information, the data, the infrastructure to do a lot of these interactive searches and pop-ups and tooltips and all this kind of stuff. So it's a great thing to keep in mind is maybe we should work towards that. But it's definitely going to be many, many years, I would imagine, before we can actually pull that off.
You'll be very glad to know that we did not include a whole set of features around user profiles. That made it off of our list, though that was something we originally thought about. The good news here, I think, too, is we like to design escalators, not elevators. So if you
Yeah.
start to pull some of the features off, the design doesn't break. It still works as a staircase, even if you start to pull some of the searches and stuff off.
Yeah. One thing I would have liked to see that I didn't really see here was really ripping apart kind of the status of this document section, and which is just this awful like screenful, like pageful of text that is redundant and repeated and really not very interesting, and it's everybody hates that, and it prevents the actual spec introduction and stuff from showing up at the top. So I saw that appearing in your printout mock-up, and honestly I would like that text to go away and have the information that's in it be somehow incorporated in a more appropriate way that doesn't require as many sentences.
Yeah, I'm going to really quickly, so I don't know if Ashita really talked through this, but we pulled out that boilerplate into these top sections of the table of contents. So on page load, the user would be dropped into the introduction, and that content would be available, but it wouldn't be in your face. So one possible solution of many we could potentially come up with.
So I don't know if you can hear me or not, but one solution is to put this content towards the end of the document, by the way, rather than the beginning, so that it doesn't get in the way of the people reading from the introductions. For
sure, some of it does belong, like anything that's targeted at lawyers can go at the end. But things like, here's where to send feedback, right now we're saying it in several places. We don't need to have it like in 3 sentences of the status, as well as in like the quick links, as well as,
Oh yeah, totally agree with that. I mean, in fact, in the new design, which I liked a lot, by the way, put those buttons to the right of the document, which I found very, very helpful.
That's great feedback though, Philippe, thank you.
You guys did a great work with this project. I was really really pleased with to see the result, and I'm certainly looking forward to deploy as much of it on the W3C, by the way.
Excellent.
I'd also like to add a little bit to what Elika said about that the visual design that we have presented right now is like a faraway vision, but we definitely tell you that we went through a lot of stages and a lot of phases into developing it to the point where it is. And just like Lauren mentioned before, we would share all of those designs. Because of time constraint, we couldn't show you all the process, but we would definitely give you, this was phase 1 of the design, this was phase 2, and this is where we finally reached. So you will have like a gradual approach to how you can execute it. And that will be really good to know. I mean, getting your feedback on that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and with that, please do visit our Medium publication as well as that Google form. Those links are up in the chat. Would appreciate your feedback on any of this stuff. And like I said, in the final week here, the students are actually done. They're done for the term. One of my students is actually graduating tomorrow. But they're taking their time in the next week to get all the content together to deliver it to you. So we're taking the next few days to get all of that packaged up and sent over. But we would appreciate any feedback you have in the meantime. We'll capture that and make it ready for the next team that takes this on.
I think one of the things I would like to do is to take all the materials and check them into the design repository where we're doing the TR design repository, so that we have it together with all of the rest of our style sheet stuff that's happening right now.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So, and just get in touch with me if there's any way I can help facilitate that.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. Thank you all for your time. I really appreciate you tuning in and listening in, and hope to hear from you.
Thank you.